Hey everybody, how's it going? I'm back with another info video. We're doing some more fact finding today on 5G and how it might be related to this whole COVID-19, panic that's going on. So I got some interesting information. I've been doing some digging because I had done some digging before and I found some information that seemed to conflict with what I thought I knew. So what do you do when you come into a situation where you see some facts, you see other facts, they don't fit together? You got to try and figure out what you missed. Either you've got bad facts, you got bad logic, so you got to resolve it. So I did. So yeah, I come to find out that there's a lot more 5G adoption in the United States already. I mean, my phone doesn't support it, and a lot of phones don't. But there are newer phones, there are newer devices, and the way they actually do the network, there's layers of functionality, different ranges that overlap with old existing technologies. So your phone could be 4G LTE, but technically it's being supported by the carrier's 5G network, which includes many different bands. They've got shorter range, high bandwidth ranges. They've got medium range, medium bandwidth ranges, and they've got really long range but low bandwidth ranges. And they all call that they call that whole thing 5G network. So when you see T-Mobile, for example, claim that they have a nationwide 5G network, it's sort of true, but see, there's a whole bunch of different ranges that are involved in their network, and they're not all the same thing. They're not all new either. Some of these are existing ranges, but now they're part of their 5G network, but your phone still identifies it as 4G LTE, and it's supported by your old phone. So the big difference for 5G is that it's an overlapping set of possible capabilities that are all kind of umbrellaed under this concept. And some of them that are new are the concerning ones, but not all of them. So some of these we've already had for a long time. There's already been radio frequencies being blasted on us in some of these ranges, and they've been relatively less concerning. I mean, some cancer rates have gone up, and if you talk on the phone all day, the correlation between having a lot of time on the phone and brain cancer is very high and noticeable. So it is a concern, but it's not new. Some of the new parts are some of these really high bandwidth ranges they're using, the millimeter wave ranges, and they can put quite a lot of data over these, but it's very short range. They have to have relatively clear line of sight even. So it's not. This isn't going to be everywhere. They'll say 5G is everywhere, but what they mean is that 5G in some of these other ranges with the lower bandwidths are pretty much everywhere. But the super high bandwidth, the high frequency millimeter wave ranges, this is still new and still being implemented. And so I'm going to look into that. I got some good news and bad news about all of this, and I'll start with the good news. The good news is that most networks okay. So actually, I'll start with the bad news because you won't know what the good news is. Because you won't know what it's compared to. All right, let me go back. So, dang it, this didn't pop up on me earlier. I hate these damn ad block things, Brooklyn Hospital. Okay, so I'll get back into that in a sec. So here's what I want to talk about today. There's different ranges that even in this millimeter wave range, or what they call ultra wideband millimeter wave range, many of the frequencies are apparently relatively safe as far as we can tell. We haven't found a whole lot of problems from some of those ranges. But there is one range in particular that is extremely hazardous and has been identified as being extremely hazardous for a very long time. I have it open here somewhere. Which one? I got too many windows open. Okay, here it is, 60 gigahertz. This is what I wanted to talk about. This is the big concern. I'm going to talk about 60 gigahertz, and I'm going to talk about some other things that aren't concerning, so you don't have to be as concerned about. Anyway, 60 gigahertz is the big cause for concern. Countless studies are showing that this frequency is very harmful, because what happens is Let's look this up. 60 gigahertz oxygen absorption. This what this means basically is that a whole lot of the signal, a whole lot of the output that you're putting out to try and get this signal across to devices and other to form your network, most of it will be taken up. It'll be blocked. Just like water absorbs microwave frequencies, or a lot of radio frequencies are canceled. Water will block them. That's why it's a really rainy and humid day. Your signal will be worse on your cell phone because a lot of that gets absorbed by these water droplets in the sky. So the 60 gigahertz range, it gets absorbed by oxygen. And, there's a decent amount of oxygen in the air. It's kind of important for it to be there. So what ends up happening, most likely, is that it just, that's where the signal ends. Some percentage of the signal ends in the oxygen. So it's imparting that energy to these oxygen molecules, and it is warming them up. That's what it does. It warms them up, the O2 molecules. So, but I mean, it's a small effect. It's not really hard. It's not really much of a noticeable effect. But it blocks your signal. So they need to crank it up. They need to crank the power up a lot more than in some of these other ranges in order to get a clean signal across. But if they do that, they can actually get a very consistent signal throughout the range because they can predictably tell how strong the signal will be based on how far it's gone. More predictably with the 60 gigahertz range than with some of the other ranges because it's got a very consistent oxygen absorption, but it's high. So all right, so so there's been many studies on the health effects of this, and they've been doing studies on 5G ranges and 5G in general for many years now, since it's been proposed. And this is the big scary frequency range that they've noticed all the big problems on. It interferes with your oxygen absorption in your lungs. It interferes with your red blood cells. It kills your hemoglobin cells. And you need those in order for your cells to get oxygen. If you kill all these red blood cells, if you destroy all of them, your body can't transfer oxygen to your cells for them to power themselves, for them to have cellular respiration. You need this to live. That's why you breathe. That's why if you stop breathing, you die. You need the oxygen to get into all your cells. And if you destroy these red blood cells that carry that oxygen throughout your body, you're going to be out of breath. You're going to have your fingernails will turn blue. You'll be panting. And, if you just keep lowering and lowering it, you will pass out. And if it gets lower and it's too low for too long, brain cells die, your cells start to die, and eventually you just die. You just die. Okay, so when they cranked some of this stuff up in Wuhan, they cranked some of the same frequency ranges up. They had a whole bunch of material that was being published beforehand in China for 4 cities. They were going to start doing 60 gigahertz in the fall last year. And when they started turning some of these on, hundreds of people just started dropping dead right into the damn streets. I mean, we've seen those videos. We've all seen those videos of people just dropping dead. I thought maybe they were fake. It seemed absurd. How could this happen? And then we stopped seeing them. They only came from one place. They were only in these 4 cities in China, including Wuhan. And we didn't see them anywhere else. Nowhere else around the world did people just, walking along normally, then they just fall over dead with no sign of infection in their lungs. We just weren't seeing it anywhere else. We still really don't see it anywhere else. But we do see some things that are very similar. And they've been talking about them in one city in the rest of the world besides China. And it just so happens to be the one city that has now more deaths than the entire rest of the country combined. I mean, it's one state, but it's centered around one city. And I think that the reason why New Jersey's is also so high is because people commute from New Jersey to New York City all the time, every day. And so they're driving through New York City, so that's why I think their numbers are also high, unusually high. Anyway, so why do I think that? So first of all, here's I've talked about this guy before. He's an ICU doctor in New York. He has been talking about this.
So I opened an intensive care unit to care for the sickest COVID positive patients in this city. In these 9 days, I have seen things I have never seen before. In treating these patients, I have witnessed medical phenomenon that just don't make sense in the context of treating a disease that is supposed to be a viral pneumonia. 9 days ago, I presumed I was opening an intensive care unit to treat patients with a virus causing a pneumonia that was ravaging lungs across the world, starting out as something mild, a cough, a sore throat, and progressively increasing in severity until ultimately ending in something called acute respiratory distress syndrome, or ARDS. This is the paradigm that every hospital in the country is working under. This is the disease, ARDS, that every hospital is preparing to treat. And this is the disease, ARDS, for which in the next 2 to 6 weeks, 100,000 Americans might be put on a ventilator. And yet, everything I have seen in the last 9 days, all the things that just don't make sense, the patients I'm seeing in front of me, the lungs I'm trying to improve, have led me to believe that COVID-19 is not this disease, and that we are operating under a medical paradigm that is untrue. In short, I believe we are treating the wrong disease, and I fear that this misguided treatment will lead to a tremendous amount of harm to a great number of people in a very short time.
Okay, so I'm going to just link the video for the rest of it. He basically goes on to say he's seeing signs that people have altitude sickness. Their bodies cannot take in the oxygen. The lungs do not appear to be infected. They're not full of phlegm. They're not full of pus. The lungs seem to be fine. They're actually damaging the lungs by trying to use ventilators on these people because the lungs are not the damaged part. It's that the red blood cells aren't there, or they're too damaged to carry the oxygen. That's the cause. That's the problem. And he's seeing many of these cases, and they're seeing these cases all over New York, and they're not really seeing them anywhere else. And so they've been seeing them so commonly that in New York they're recognizing that they need to treat this a different way. So instead of trying to use ventilators and trying to force air into lungs that are full of crud, they're trying to instead enrich the oxygenization of their blood because it can't oxygenate. Why is there a stupid ad taking up half the screen? Okay. So, anyway, they're seeing that all over New York. This is a UK article, but it's talking about in New York. And it's full of ads, so I'm going to close it because it's like lagging my computer down. Jesus. So anyway, so let's look into 5G. So 5G is apparently a threat. Hold on. I've so far painted part of many different threads here and haven't tied them together. So the good news now, I'll finally be able to get into the good news. I started looking at all the major carriers for cellular networks in the United States, and they've already started implementing the millimeter wave ultra wideband frequencies in select pockets of select cities. So what ranges are they using? Because we don't want them to be using 60 gigahertz. That sounds super dangerous. So fortunately, every one of them that I found is not using 60 gigahertz. This is T-Mobile's. They're using these ranges here. This gives them the same capability as the 60 gigahertz. But as far as we know, so far, I mean, there could be other health risks that I'm not aware of. They don't appear to be causing so many problems. Oh, and that's another thing is that they think that when it comes to these radio frequencies, the only thing you need to worry about is whether it's ionizing or non-ionizing. And if it's not ionizing, supposedly it's totally safe. But no, that's not exactly how it works because like we're seeing here, this interference with oxygen, it doesn't matter whether your cells are being directly damaged by ionizing radiation. It matters that these oxygen cells are being they're being affected while they're bound to your red blood cells, which is damaging the red blood cells. It's not irradiating the red blood cells. It's damaging them by being attached to, over-energized oxygen molecules. So it doesn't matter whether it's doing genetic damage from radiation to your DNA and your cells, and then that's not the problem here. It's that it's literally at a molecular level interfering through the oxygen and screwing up your red blood cells. Bad news. And it's something to look at. Besides just, there's more than one way to be affected by radiation. They have this device that Raytheon built where it blasts you with radio waves, non-ionizing radiation, but it blasts you with so damn much of it at once that it can literally burst a human being into flames. But it's non-ionizing, so I'm sure it's totally safe. No, you can totally impart enough energy into people, into cells, even without doing DNA damage. You can just do enough heat damage to damage cells, and that's what's going on here. So, T-Mobile is good. We're safe on that. Here's Verizon. They're using a different range as well. Hold on, let me check something. I just want to look at this again. Let me go back over to T-Mobile. Okay, here's 28 gigahertz. They're also using 28 gigahertz. Generally, these licensed frequencies, these frequencies have to be licensed, so you have to get permission to use them. Okay, where am I now? This is talking about networks and what ranges they're using. See, these are the ranges we've already been using for some time. It's talking about millimeter wave. This one doesn't say what frequency though. Here's some frequencies mentioned, not 60 gigahertz. So we're still in the clear throughout most of this. Here's one, New York City. New York University. They have a $22 million grant to set up a public test bed for testing 5G technologies. They got this a couple of years ago. So that's concerning. A university is using it. They're going to be using unlicensed ranges most likely because it costs money to get permission to use the licensed ranges. All right, so let me keep going. Millimeter wave health effects. I couldn't really find out much of use here. Okay, so here's another article about the New York University's 5G credentials public test bed. 60 gigahertz. Let's see. Initial version of the system will operate in the 60 gigahertz millimeter wave band. This is a huge cause for concern right here, okay, people? We've already seen there. This is like a compilation of information from many studies of what 60 gigahertz does. People suspect 5G frequencies will cause problems having to do with oxygen. This is from years ago, okay? This part here is from years ago based on studies that are from even older. An activist, blah, blah, California research, 60 gigahertz band. The ability for a person's blood hemoglobin to bind with oxygen will be damaged. This is years ago. This guy's saying exactly what ICU doctors in New York are saying today. This is from studies from years ago, before this happened. And these aren't the only studies. I mean, there was many independent researchers who did studies into this, and they all found high oxygen reactivity, high oxygen absorption, and could potentially damage hemoglobin. Hemoglobin in red blood cells, it's the same thing pretty much. Yeah, check this out. I'm going to link this as well. And this is based on a bunch of other studies. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. I haven't even read through all this. There's other ranges that could cause problems apparently as well. Okay, so I haven't looked through all of this. I basically just saw this first part talking about 60 gigahertz and exactly the symptoms that we're seeing today in an area that uses 60 gigahertz. Is that a coincidence? I don't think so. Okay, so here they're talking about accommodating a wide range of equipment, multiple. Okay. I don't know exactly where this thing is running and how big the range is and how powerful they've got these things cranked up, how many nodes there are. I haven't found that information, but I did see that they're using this very dangerous band. Okay, so let's keep going to some of these articles. Breaking wireless boundaries. It's the same one I already have open. More about this project. I don't know when this went online or how long it's been online. I couldn't find that information. Here's a Verizon offering a 5G test bed. They're using a different range. Okay, so this is what you want to look into. Oxygen. This is a known effect. This is a scientifically proven, well-known, undisputed effect of using 60 gigahertz. The part that should be a no-brainer is that since our bodies need to bind with oxygen in order to move it around, possibly having a high, a powerful reaction with oxygen could be harmful to the body. No joke, no duh. But apparently, even after a whole bunch of studies have shown this to be the case, it's been ignored. If you go talking about this, you're called a flat earther. So anyway, that's pretty much what I wanted to cover. Some good news, some bad news. The good news is that pretty much every cellular carrier in the United States that I've found is not using 60 gigahertz. And the only other carriers that I found that were using it anywhere in the world so far were in China. They started using it in 4 cities in China in like November. And I can't remember the name of the company because that's all Chinese. It's hard to remember the pronunciations of all these words. But yeah, I saw a document, which I should have had open because I don't know where I'm going to find it again right now because I saw it months ago, talking about their rollout of this in 4 cities. They were talking about that summer of last year. Anyway, but yeah, I'm more concerned with the New York numbers, the United States numbers. It's over half. This is growing at over half the rate of the rest of the country. So it's just about overtaken half of the total today. But in order to get that much ground against the rest of the numbers, their rates are increasing much higher than everybody else's. It's very concerning, and they're seeing these symptoms that nobody else is seeing throughout the rest of the country, only near New York, and people who travel through New York. And yeah, it's a real shame. Something should be done. I don't know what else I can do other than try and point it out. But yeah, I guess I was a little hyperbolic the last time I was talking about it because I didn't have all the exact specifics of which ranges were the threats and how widespread it was. But now I've learned a lot more on it. Now I've shared that information. Hopefully, it's useful to people out there. Be careful if you live in New York. You're gonna want to. If you can find out where these broadcasts are coming out of, you're going to want to stay away from those. And if you can't, and if you're noticing that you're short of breath, if you're getting blue fingertips and blue lips, and you're out of breath all the time, even when you're not working out, you are running low on oxygen, and you need to take action immediately. You need to stay out of the area that you're probably being hit with this from, and or you need to try and boost your red blood cell counts back up. And you can do that by getting, with supplements, you can get basically you need 2 parts to form a red blood cell. You need chlorophyll, which makes up like the vast majority of what our red blood cells are made of, is almost exactly molecularly identical to chlorophyll, which you get from leafy green plants. And then you need iron. So you need chlorophyll and iron, and with those 2 parts, your body can very easily manufacture red blood cells to get your counts back up, and you'll be out of breath less. So go ahead and try that. Again, I'm not a medical doctor. Don't take this as bankable medical advice or anything. It's just a suggestion from a layman. But yeah, try and do your own fact finding, do your own research. Don't just arbitrarily dismiss things because some random jerk on the television compared it to flat Earth or compared it to conspiracy theorizing. Don't let other people tell you what you're allowed to think and what you're allowed to look up. If you have concerns, and I think that this is very concerning, do some digging, man. People's lives could be at stake. And we can't just keep saying, oh, it's just coronavirus. It's just coronavirus. Why the heck are they so much higher than everybody else? And why are their doctors describing symptoms different from everybody else? If it is something else and it's being completely dismissed as something that is not, more people will die. And apparently whatever is going on there is killing more people in one city than this whole COVID-19 thing that everybody's been freaking out about in the rest of the entire country. So, I mean, if we're supposed to be terrified because, if you're in South Carolina or whatever, and, you notice this tiny percentage of people have died that got blamed on coronavirus, and you're supposed to be terrified to the point of not leaving your home, why the hell is no one looking at this with a more critical eye? This is far more terrifying. Anyway, I'm concerned. But yeah, I don't know. Try and get your own clear facts. I'll try and do my part. Hopefully, this whole nightmare will end before too long. Because I'm still also much more concerned about the economic impacts of what all this is gonna. All of this, people losing their jobs. We've had over 20 million cases of unemployment in the last 3.5 weeks now. It's disgusting. And I'm very concerned. So many more old people are going to be dying from being destitute and unable to get medical care or get, good treatment facilities because of the economic state of destroying the economy than are going to have suffered from this COVID thing. So, and plus, there's all the unquantifiable deaths. Like, say you have a job and you notice a strange growth. And you have insurance, so you're like, oh, well, I'll go check it out. Why not? I got insurance. It doesn't cost me anything extra. You go in, you find out it's cancer. It's it's a really malignant cancer that if you hadn't addressed right away, it would have spread. But you caught it early, you get it taken out, you're good. But now you're one of the 20 plus million who's lost their job. You notice a strange growth. You have no insurance. You got other things you're worrying about at the moment. You got to figure out how you're going to put food on the table for your family, and so you don't get it checked out early, and you forget about it, and you worry about other concerns because it's just a little growth. It can't be that big of a deal, right? Well, it turns out it is malignant, and it does spread, and it goes stage 4, and it spreads all over your body, and now you are your life is in serious risk. You could die, and it's because of this economic impact that has happened in your life, and that's going to be, it's unquantifiable how many people's lives will be affected by this and in what ways. That's just one example that was probably going to be extremely common. There's also a strong correlation between suicides and economic difficulties because of all the hardships that people are going to be suffering from losing their jobs, losing their livelihoods, losing their self-respect, from being able to take care of themselves, and just being isolated and scared and alone. None of these things are healthy, and all of them are far more likely to cause far more harm than these numbers, which otherwise, other than this one crazy high spike, are still like 0.02% increase in the yearly death rates, which are already a small percentage of the population. So, to me, it's just completely insane that we've had this insane, unprecedented, worldwide overreaction to what is essentially a yearly occurrence. 60 to 80,000 people die every year from just the flu alone. Why are we freaking out and destroying our entire economy over, worst case, very inaccurate numbers, still not even as much as a yearly flu? Why? It's just crazy. It's got to end. People got to get their head out of their ass. They got to stop living in fear. I mean, this is basically, I saw this hilarious meme that kind of puts it in perspective. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Bear with me. Oh yeah, this guy, he's also talking about this. He's another expert doctor. Okay. Here we go. This is the one. Look at this meme. This is hilarious. This is, I mean, it would be hilarious if it wasn't so true. This is essentially what we're doing here. We got, oh my God, COVID-19, let's all be terrified. Blast it. The economy. Yeah, it's in ruins. Anyway, that's pretty much all I had to talk about today. Everybody hang in there. Do your part, to try and get us going back in the right direction. Try and restore some semblance of reason to the public discourse. And, have a good one. See you next time.